Hi, how are you doing? Here we are talking about, yeah, you can go out.
Having it out.
Yeah, this is a fairly informal,
Okay.
yeah. And welcome to an informal discussion of broadcasting. First, we're going to do a discussion of being a news anchor and what to do in terms of being a broadcaster on camera sitting down. And then we'll talk about being a broadcaster standing up. So, some different things. First, the question of sound, because if we're a broadcaster, you want to hear the voice. The audience wants to hear your voice and what you have to say. And so consequently, you'll be wearing a mic. Now, often in professional television, particularly for anchors, you'll see them with two lavalier microphones on, and that is if one microphone happens to have some challenges, then the sound engineers can move to the other microphone. You want to have it roughly about 6 inches down from your mouth. Either you want to have it on a lapel or on a tie, and that would be the best location to have it. You don't want to have it too close, and you don't want to have it too far. If it goes too far, and I'm taking it away now, then of course you have the problem of being heard. And if you bring it in too close, then all of a sudden it's going to sound strange. So you want to have it roughly about 6 inches from your mouth. Now, there's the question that almost everyone has who has ever listened to themselves on tape or some sort of recording, and that is, I sound different. Yes, you do. And that's because when you hear yourself speak, what happens is the air passing over your vocal cords causes a series of vibrations, which then is conducted by a series of bones, and then cartilage, and then empty spaces that create the resonance that makes up your voice. Those vibrations of that resonance is conducted via bone, and particularly your chin bone, up to your tympanium, your eardrum. And so consequently, you get a wide variety and a different variety of vibrations in your eardrum when you speak than when you hear just vibrations that are traveling through the air. So consequently, everyone thinks you sound differently than how you think you sound. That is entirely, entirely natural, because no one else has your bone structure, for which you're very glad. So, how do you speak when you're on the air? Generally, what you want to do is not speak like you're on stage, because then that will cause things to peak and your sounds very unnatural. On the other hand, if you simply mumble and chit-chat, then people aren't going to be able to hear you. If you have mush mouth in your mouth, and you're not speaking distinctly, and you're not going to make any of your sounds going to sound good. If you don't speak distinctly, then people aren't going to understand what you say either. So the thing is to mind your diction, particularly in terms of consonants, because crisp consonant diction is what makes the language sound distinct. And it's that T, CT sound at the end of distinct that makes distinct distinct. The other thing is you want to speak as if you were talking to someone. Right now, I'm in an empty room looking at a lens. But you want to give the impression to the audience that you're speaking to them. And so consequently, you behave as if you're talking to a friend or your mother or someone to whom you feel very kindly. And that is the way that you can give the impression that you're speaking to someone on the other side of that lens. Now, if you've ever been in a picture, you know that there's that flash. The reason that flash happens is so that there's light on your face so that a picture can be taken. Video is a very long picture, and so consequently you have to have lights on, and those lights are there to illuminate your face, which means that, including your eyes, you're going to have lights on your face and on your eyes. So one of the things that you want to do is to think about, that's all right. There are several consequences to this. I don't have any on today, but under normal situations, you see this large reflective surface on my hair, and also in terms of the shiny surface that's left by a number of fine hair care products, is you want to think about how much shine is coming off the top of your head. If your fine hair care products give too much of a shine, you might have a talented lighting designer in studio that can help get a little of the shine off, because you want a little shine, but not a lot, because otherwise that can be very reflective to the people at home. The other thing that is going to happen, particularly for those of you who want to do this professionally, is that what's going to happen is you're going to have to wear makeup. Yes, that's right, makeup. Usually what is used these days in most television studios, some folks use a cream-based makeup, but most folks tend to still use pancake. Pancake makeup is a sort of thing that is water-soluble, which is one of the ways that makes it useful so that you can use water and soap to wash your face. For those of you who don't use water and soap to wash your face, but a fine skin-saving product, those work just as well in taking off pancake. One of the things that you'll find, too, is that the reason you wear makeup is several, 2 or 3, is one, is you'll notice I look white and pasty under the lights. So you want to be wearing makeup. Secondly, most of us don't have eyes that naturally pop out once we're under strong light. And so chances are you're going to be wearing some sort of eye makeup. And finally, the other thing that's going to happen is that most of us have imperfections in our skin. I happen to have a couple of blotches on this side of my forehead this morning. And so makeup helps even out the complexion so that you don't look a little bit problematic as you come into the people's homes. So makeup is something you want to do. For our exercise, I don't think you have to worry about it, particularly men. I know that some of you have never worn makeup before and think that you may never wear makeup. Those of you who are professionals will get there soon enough. Those of you who are women, how do you deal with makeup on camera? Those of you who are used to wearing makeup, what you want to do is aim for something that looks somewhat natural without being overdone. So, of course, the eyes, probably the eyelashes, simply because they help frame the eye. Very light on the rouge to give some color to the cheek, and possibly just a very bit of natural lip color, and you'll be fine. Those of you who feel that you have real skin problems, or as I do, am having blemishes this morning, then that's something you might want to think about. But these are issues that happen if you're going to be on camera. Now, the other thing that you'll notice is, as I've been talking to you, is a couple of things in terms of my eyes. One is, I'm not blinking a lot. Because what happens is that, you know, under the lights, is that some people feel that they have to blink. A lot of blinking can be very disturbing to people watching you at home. The other thing is how do I look at the camera? Unlike in an interview, where you don't want the interviewee seeming like he's speaking directly in the camera, when we're talking about being an anchor or a reporter, is that you do want to talk to the camera because you're speaking through the camera to the people at home. And so consequently, you do need to speak to it. Now, one of the challenges that I had when I first started working on camera is that I'm a head bobber. Is that when I talk, I tend to bob my head. And in bobbing my head, particularly in a close shot like we have now, is that that can seem disturbing to people. And you don't want to have that going on. You want to think about being able to keep your head relatively still as you speak. It's not that you have to be a mummy or a statue, but you do want to keep things relatively still. Another tip, as you're looking at the lens, you want to think about looking at the lens with the same eye. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Most of the time we've been talking, I've been focusing on the lens with my left eye, but now I'll shift to the right eye, and now to the left eye. And if I keep shifting back and forth, it's a small thing, but in a tight shot like this, going from right eye to left eye, from right eye to left eye, to look at the camera can be, again, very disturbing to the people at home. So choose an eye that you're looking primarily at the camera with, and just stay at that. One of the reasons that I'm choosing the left eye in this particular studio is up to my left is a very large monitor. And if you've ever Skyped before, you know that one of the distractions of having yourself on video camera is the distraction of possibly looking at yourself. The problem is that now I'm looking at me and you're looking at me looking sideways. So if I'm looking at the camera with my left eye, then consequently I'll be looking at you and not at me, and not be distracted. Now, in terms of dress, for our assignment, I'm not going to ask you to dress anything differently, but if you're going to be on camera, particularly in a broadcast situation, you have to remember that you're going to be going into people's homes. And so consequently, you'd want to show respect for that. Men, that means necessarily a tie and probably a jacket or a fleece of some sort, something that looks presentable. Also, you don't want to wear hats or caps because, one, that can lend a shadow over the eyes, and if you have a shadow over your eyes, you can look a little bit dicey and sketchy. So consequently, no hats, please. Ladies, if you happen to have, and I guess some of the men, I can't remember all of your haircuts, if you have long hair, you want to have a hairstyle in which the hair comes away from the face. You never want to be in a situation, although those hairstyles come in and out, where the hair covers, a woman's hairstyle covers maybe one eye or certainly covers a large portion of the face. This does not work very well in a broadcast situation. In terms of dress, if you are wearing a jacket, one of the things that you normally do is you have the back of the jacket, and one of the things that you think about is clearing that out. Well, the problem is if you do that, is for some people, then all of a sudden the coat comes up like this. And that doesn't look very good on camera. So what you want to think of, particularly if you're a gentleman, is actually sitting on the back of your jacket. And that way, I'm making sure here in the monitor, right, that I've sat back down, that the jacket looks fine over the tie. The other thing that you want to think about in terms of sitting on camera is thinking about sitting forward. Because if I sit back in the chair and start talking like this doesn't look very appetizing. This looks like I'm not very energized and I'm not going to do anything. The other thing, of course, is that if I sit like this, the bottom part of my spine is collapsed, and I've brought the microphone closer to my lips, which makes the sound weird. But if I sit forward in the chair, and a lot of studios actually have extra cushions in the back of the chair that force you to sit forward. And that is going to be the thing that's going to help you in terms of sitting appropriately in talking to people. You want to keep your shoulders as relaxed as possible and your neck as relaxed as possible as you talk to people. Now, we've spoken about how to deal with a microphone, how to deal with lights in our face. We've talked about makeup, dress, and how to sit. Now, in terms of reading, it is true that in many instances in professional broadcasting at a anchor desk like this, you will have a lot of your text on a teleprompter. However, as often it also happens that sometimes things are read live for a variety of reasons. And the thing to do is, if you are going to read, and actually even with a teleprompter, you will notice that some broadcasters will behave as if they are reading. And you'll notice that what happens is that I take a glance at my text, and it could be even a blank script if you've got a teleprompter. But every now and again, you'll notice a broadcaster doing that to give the impression that he is looking away. Because frankly, as you've ever noticed, if you've ever been in a place where someone is staring at you for a long period of time, it gets a little distressing. And so the looking at the text briefly gives the anchor the opportunity to break the stare. The thing you want to do with your text is to look down, get phrases, and come back up and speak directly to your audience. Here I have a film review by A.O. Scott from the New York Times for a new film, Blue is the Warmest Color. Blue is the Warmest Color is a feverish, generous, exhausting love story, the chronicle of a young woman's passage from curiosity to heartbreak by way of wrenching and blissful attachment to another, slightly older woman. Although there is plenty of weeping and sighing, the methods of the director are less melodramatic than meteorological. He studies the radar and scans the horizon in search of emotional weather patterns and then rushes out into the gale, dragging the audience through fierce and soul-battering squalls. Now, did I do that perfectly? I didn't. And one of the things that you want to figure out, particularly if you're ever going to do live broadcasting, is knowing when to go back and when not. I had a long pause there, which wasn't very helpful, and because I stumbled on the word meteorological. I chose that because meteorological can be a hard word for some people to say. So one of the things you want to look at before you read your script on camera is to see if there are any words that are just kind of tough to say. Always practice names before you go on camera. If you're going out live, do you go back and re-say the word? It depends. As a general rule, and like all general rules, it can be broken, but as a general rule, don't go back. If you need to make an apology or a retraction for having misspoken, you can always do so later. But as a general rule, don't go back. One of my father's favorite stories was listening to a DJ doing a live ad on radio in Des Moines when I was a boy. This was in the late 1960s, if you can believe it. Back in that day, there was a beer called Schlitz. You can see where this story is going. The Schlitz Beer Company had as their tagline for all ads, "When you're out of Schlitz, you're out of beer." And there were thousands and thousands of wonderful announcers who were able to say that correctly. Unfortunately, on one bright fall morning, an announcer at a radio station in Des Moines made the obvious mistake. And then, rather than letting it go just the one time, went back. And as he went back, he got tickled. And the more he got tickled, the more he said it, and the more that he said it incorrectly. In those days, the FCC was far more inclined to penalize both stations and broadcasters who did not meet the high quality standards set by the FCC, particularly in the use of foul language. So consequently, that was a funny story, but it did cost the radio station and announcer quite some. So as a general rule, unless something is really terrible, you don't want to go back. And that ends up our little lesson of how to be a news anchor. I hope that these tips have been very helpful to you, and I look forward to seeing you on my screen. Thanks very much. Good night.